So here we are, the time for the video series that will cause me to lose all of my subscribers. Oh well, it was bound to happen at some point. In any case, this is where I will be bringing up games that are overrated and games that are underrated. Now, the one rule for this video series is that I cannot talk about the most popular franchises because that would be too obvious. So here we go, with the first overrated game, and this episode will cover action RPGs since I tend to have an affinity with these games, so I'm more likely to find some underrated gems. But before we get to that, we need to start with some overrated trash, and the game I'm talking about is a Falcom game, so I know for a fact that people are going to murder me over this opinion, but Ys Origin just pisses me off. This game honestly felt like it was slapped together at the last minute. It feels excruciatingly lackluster, especially for a Ys game. I mean, the entire game takes place inside the final dungeon of Ys but 1, and anyone who has been through that dungeon knows exactly what I'm talking about. Well, all I'm going to say is that if you hated that dungeon, don't even think about laying a finger on this game, because this game is even worse than that dungeon. Each floor has its own elemental paint job, but they lack the flavour that other dungeons in the Ys series have that makes them stand out. Put simply, they feel more like challenge rooms than actual dungeons to explore, and what I mean by this is that the Ys series has always revolved around exploring the world and uncovering its mysteries by plundering the ruins. Ys Origin's world, or should I say tower, feels completely bland in this regard. Heck, even Devil May Cry 3, a game that is also set inside a huge tower, managed to create some interesting locations to explore within it. So why do I not feel the same way about Ys Origin's tower? Well, like I said, it's basically a series of challenge rooms. The layouts are the only things they have going for them. It's kind of like exploring one of those randomly generated dungeons in Diablo 3 or something, except it isn't randomly generated, it's just an excuse to give players somewhere to fight enemies and avoid obstacles. Speaking of fighting enemies, Ys Origin uses the outdated combat system of Ark of Nepishtim, which for the time it was released was acceptable, but by the time Ys Origin came out, this system really started to become stale. Now, for God knows what reason, Ys Origin and Ys the Other Felghana are considered to be the greatest action RPGs ever made by the consensus, and I was always bewildered by that. Like, did you ever play Valkyrie Profile 2, the Tales series, the Star Ocean series? There are games in those series that are vastly superior to these two games. Tales of Symphonia, for instance, a game that lets you use multiple combo attacks as well as the ability to guard and sidestep attacks. Ys Origin doesn't even let you dodge. There's a shield spell and an attack you can spam for iframes, but nothing that's actually practical. All you can do is run around and mash X, and occasionally mash square for special moves. I mean, it's something I guess, but the biggest issue is the lack of evasive maneuvers. Now, if this game was released back in 5th gen on PS1, then I could understand, hence why I'm so lenient on Ark of Nepishtim. But this game was released in 2006, and for a game released at that point, it is absolute trash. They should have added an evade button, or a proper guard button. None of this iframe attack or shield attack crap. Give us actual maneuvers that let us ensure our survival, just like Ys 7 did. The story is hit or miss. I guess it depends on who you start with. If you start with Unica, get ready for the most monotonous story you'll ever hear in your life. This farm girl walks around with an axe and calls herself a knight. Get yourself a change of clothes, woman. You're in the fucking army. Are the goddesses really that cheap that they can't outfit a rookie knight? In any case, the best character in this game is arguably Hugo, and he is literally the only saving grace of this game. He's kind of a mix of my two favourite video game characters, those being Lazar Belef from Valkyrie Profile and Ryudo from Grandia 2. For that reason, I did enjoy his story simply because he didn't act like some boring ass goody two-shoes protagonist throughout the entire game, which was refreshing. Props to Falcom for actually making a character like that in the game. Regardless, this doesn't save the game from being a total disappointment to me. The soundtrack of these games is usually outstanding, but this game's soundtrack felt completely flat and amateur by comparison. The only song that I even remotely liked was the one that played in the fire area. The rest of the soundtrack is forgettable, which is crazy to say about an Ys title, but it really is. It kind of sounds like a poor man's Valkyrie Profile 1 soundtrack at times, in the sense that it has the similar feel, but it's nowhere near as well executed. It just feels sloppy like the rest of the game. Anyways, I've talked enough about this boring ass ordeal long enough. Time to talk about a game that I think was misunderstood. A game that many people didn't get a chance to try, and those that did hated it for silly reasons. That game is Infinite Undiscovery, my favourite game on the Xbox 360. It doesn't even come close really. This game is an unforgettable experience from beginning to end, and the reason why I gained an affinity for Tri-Ace games in the first place. If you are a fan of Star Ocean or Valkyrie Profile, Infinite Undiscovery delivers the same feel that both of those games have. It is so unapologetically Tri-Ace that I can't help but love it. The biggest appeal of Infinite Undiscovery, however, may surprise you. While Tri-Ace often tends to focus on its gameplay systems, I actually found this game to have one of the most enjoyable storylines I have ever experienced in a Tri-Ace game. Sure, I may not be as attached to it as Valkyrie Profile 2 or Covenant of the Plume, but damn, this story is so engaging, particularly in the second half of the game, as I felt that the cast of characters are what make this story work so well, as they offer some really interesting dynamics, though the world building also plays a big part in this too, bringing some really interesting themes to the table that I never saw coming. Despite being a mostly light-hearted experience, the game can get really dark at times, and I think that these tonal differences blend in so damn well that it makes for one hell of a journey. Now, a lot of people hate this game's story and characters for God knows what reason. I have no idea why. I mean, the lip syncing is bad for sure, and the voice work could be better in some parts, but the same could be said for just about every other Tri-Ace game, really. Like I said, this game is so unapologetically Tri-Ace to the point that it even has item creation. Yeah, that's right, you even have the same item creation from Star Ocean: The Last Hope, albeit a bit more primitive, though that's to be expected from an older game. Each character has their own item creation skills, as well as their own set of items to craft. This gives each character their own unique identity that sets them apart from others. There are also abilities that can be used out in the field, like the ability to crush boulders and open locked treasure chests. They also have a lot of stuff in the start screen, like tiles and stuff, which exist to further diversify them. The combat is a bit messy to say the least, but at least it's more straightforward than Star Ocean Until the End of Time, and honestly, it's not exactly a chore to play. There are some good aspects to it, like the ability to build up long combo chains and parrying enemy attacks to stun them, though there are problems such as the constant staggering each time you are hit, as well as the fact that the menu doesn't pause the game, which is a nightmare. Also, you cannot directly control any party member besides Capel, which is kind of lame if you ask me. Thankfully, the game's soundtrack more than makes up for this. By now, if you've watched my top 10 list, you should know exactly how much I adore this game's soundtrack. It's my third favourite soundtrack by Motoi Sakuraba, topped only by Batten Kaitos and Valkyrie Profile 2, and I do not say this lightly, as those games have phenomenal soundtracks themselves. If you enjoy any of Motoi Sakuraba's work, then you owe yourself to experience this fantastic soundtrack. Ultimately, when you consider all the above, this game managed to surpass Star Ocean Until the End of Time in every single way, despite being very much the same as that game combat-wise. Yet, Star Ocean Until the End of Time gets all the attention, which is crazy. Honestly, if you have an Xbox 360 and you consider yourself a fan of Tri-Ace, then you owe yourself the pleasure of playing Infinite Undiscovery. That's all I have to say, guys, and I do apologise for the video quality. I didn't have any way of capturing footage for Infinite Undiscovery since I don't have a capture card, so I had to make do with the footage I had left over on my YouTube channel, so do bear that in mind. But yes, in any case, I'll see you all later.